Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. The Global Politics of Technology, a new book from Silicon Valley leader, Palantir CEO Alex Karp.
I grew up protesting in D.C. with my parents, and no one listened. If you want to go back to that, just do not read the book, pretend this isn't happening.
How the tech titan views tech's power and the politics in Europe, Germany, and the U.S.
I'll tell you something I think Trump does very, very well. He says, I'm not going to accept a paradigm that essentially leads to a stupid conclusion.
And peace talks for the Ukraine-Russia war in Saudi Arabia. The U.S., Russia, Saudis, but no Ukraine. Trump's former Deputy National Security Advisor, Victoria Coates.
I find it interesting that what we have here, the world's three largest energy producers, kind of gathered together.
Plus, the latest on a stunning plane crash on a Toronto runway. Our Phil LeBeau.
It's never one single thing. It's usually a series of events.
The Doge cuts keep a-coming, and the Big Apple mayor could be facing a reckoning.
The mayor of New York is now a hostage. He's a hostage. That's what he is. He's a hostage of the White House.
It's Tuesday. Nope, not Monday. February 18th, 2025. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We are live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick, along with Joe Kernan and Andrew Ross Sorkin. It's a Monday morning for us, sort of, even though it's Tuesday. We're here. Markets are back open again. Feels like a Monday.
Meantime, let's say about this Delta Airlines regional jet, which I'm sure many of you have seen at least images of. It crashed while landing yesterday at Toronto's International Airport. The flight taking off from Minneapolis, St. Paul. All 80 passengers and crew were evacuated. 18 injured people were taken to local hospitals. At least 3, we should mention, did have critical but not life-threatening injuries, one of whom was a child. A passenger on the flight telling CNN they hit the ground hard, then the plane went sideways, flipped upside down, and the Toronto airport has now closed 2 runways as it investigates the crash. Phil LeBeau is going to join us in just a little bit to bring us more information. But when you see a plane upside down like that, and you see images and video, I don't know if you saw some of the passengers taking video as they were evacuating from the plane. It's just another scary incident. We've had a whole bunch of them.
Since the beginning of this year.
Since the beginning of this year.
I was actually on a plane reading about it in the last half hour coming in, and there was a lot of turbulence yesterday because of those high winds.
My daughter flew into DCA and said it was, I don't know, you can't help but look around when you're coming down with what happened.
What happened there with the helicopter?
A couple of weeks ago.
Meantime, Southwest Airlines plan to cut 15% of its corporate workforce, or about 1,750 jobs. It's the first mass layoff in the airline's 53-year history. Southwest has been facing pressure to try to rein in expenses, including from activist investor Elliott Management. And CEO Bob Jordan said the decision was a difficult and monumental shift, but corporate overhead, he says, has been growing faster than the rest of the airline's operation.
In a new Wall Street Journal report, it says that Elon Musk's Doge team is seeking access to data systems within the IRS that house personal taxpayer information. The report says that access hadn't been granted as of yesterday morning, but it was considered an urgent goal by the Doge team. A White House spokesman told the Journal, waste, fraud, and abuse have been deeply entrenched in our broken system for far too long, and it takes direct access to a system or to the system to identify and fix it. Separately, an effort by Doge officials to obtain sensitive records at the Social Security Administration prompted the resignation of Acting Commissioner Michelle King. King served at the administration for more than 30 years. She was named Acting Commissioner back in January. The Doge team published a website detailing the savings it says it has made so far, totaling $55 billion. It ranks the biggest cuts as coming from USAID, the Department of Education, and the Office of Personnel Management. And it posted a wall of receipts detailing cuts that it has made. Meantime, in a court filing yesterday, the White House said Elon Musk is a senior advisor to the president and not an employee specifically of Doge. It said he has no decision-making authority and can only advise the president. and communicate the president's directives. The filing specifically says that Musk is not the administrator of the U.S. Doge service, but it does not specify who is or if there is one.
I guess that's because of conflict of interest in the policies. Yeah. That's probably the reason for the
technical nature of this. Yeah. But I think in reality, obviously, Elon is running Doge.
Yeah. Right. He's got Trump's blessing to run it. Separately, a judge has temporarily blocked some mass terminations at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. In a ruling on Friday, the judge ruled that the Bureau could not terminate employees without cause. The order prevents any mass firings and prohibits the deletion of agency data.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul said last night that she plans to meet with New York City leaders today to consider how to bring stability to the city's government. That could include removing Mayor Eric Adams from office. That is a power that's granted to the governor by the city's charter. Hochul said in her words, overturning the will of the voters is a serious step that should not be taken lightly. That said, the alleged conduct at City Hall that has been reported over the past 2 weeks is troubling and cannot be ignored. President Trump's Justice Department recently ordered Manhattan prosecutors to drop their bribery case against the mayor. He had been charged with taking illegal campaign contributions from Turkey and accepting $100,000 in travel and hotel perks in exchange for official acts. He has denied wrongdoing. Several top prosecutors resigned over the decision to drop the charges. Yesterday, 4 New York City deputy mayors announced their resignation.
I mean, this case is unbelievable. I don't know what you guys all think of it, but the fact that, the mayor of New York is now a hostage is a hostage. That's what he is. He's a hostage of the White House. At this point.
Probably wasn't done in a very tough way, but the Justice Department can decide whether the charges were serious enough to pursue. That's what they do. $100,000. I think he should be charged with being so inept at taking decent bribes. I mean, if you look at, $100,000, Menendez or any good politician should be ashamed if they got a couple of upgrades and $100,000.
Menendez, who's now gone.
Who's now gone, but take your pick. Biden Inc. is now gone, too.
But to see that
I don't have it. He's a Democrat. Yeah, I thought you liked him as a mayor. I've been on his side. I don't have a strong feeling. You want to get rid of him, get rid of him. That's fine.
No, I think that right now there's a major conundrum here. There's 3 things going on here. Within the Justice Department, there's the leader of the Southern District in this case, who was a clear conservative.
Right. For the way it was done. I've seen conservatives criticizing what's going on.
Resigned from her job because she said that she couldn't in good conscience go through with this because of the quid pro quo. So that's one piece of it that's going to...
Explain the quid pro quo.
The quid pro quo being that he is not going to be prosecuted so long as he participates and helps with the immigration issue here in New York.
Which is a good thing.
Right? It's a very interesting thing because it goes back to whether
anybody can be where we want something from. It's good that you've got the mayor of New York City on board with efforts to clean up the city.
But interestingly, in the way it's set up, it says if you don't,
I know.
If you don't do it,
Homan said I'll be up your ass.
They can go prosecute him.
Right. Homan said I'll be up your ass.
You're not supposed to use the legal system like that.
It's a worthy goal.
But you're not supposed to use the legal system like that. You're just not. It's a complete. It is a that is people talk about a constitutional crisis.
I've said again and again. I'm glad you're on the case now. I am. I'm glad we got the Fourth Estate looking at everything again, and I just think it's good. It's good to hold politicians to power, and I'm behind you 100% on this. We got to do it. It's awesome. Welcome back.
But now we're going to talk a little. Well, I should say airlines, but more importantly, this terrible crash.
Yeah, let's get to Phil's comments on it's early in the investigation, but this we've all seen it. A plane basically flipped over at Toronto Airport. Phil, amazing that there's some injuries, but no loss of life, which is great news.
100%, Joe. And this is a testament to a couple of things. One, there's luck involved. Whenever there's an air crash like this, you have to have luck involved for people, not only a few to survive, but all to survive, especially if the aircraft flipped over, then caught on fire. The Canadian Safety Board, which is the counterpart to the NTSB, it is investigating this crash right now because it happened on Canadian soil. But the NTSB and the FAA will be assisting the Canadians in this investigation. No fatalities. Believe it or not, no fatalities. There were 18 injuries. That is a testament to the structure of the aircraft and the fact that the seats now in all airplanes are made to stay attached to the frame of the fuselage much better than they were in the past. You might have had people ejected from seats in the past. Those safety standards have changed over the last 10 to 15 years. That's one reason why you had people who were still buckled into their seats upside down inside the fuselage who were able to get out of the plane. And also, they got out the way you're supposed to get out whenever they say there's an emergency. You drop everything, you get out. You don't pick up your briefcase if you have one. You don't search around for your purse. And I know people will sit there and say, well, obviously you don't do that. You know how many times, if you look at video of planes that maybe skid off the runway and it's not a major disaster, but they have to deploy the slides, it's people who are worried about, do I have my backpack? Do I have something else? No, you get out. And so it is remarkable that nobody died in this crash. But again, the Canadian Safety Board, NTSB, FAA, all launching an investigation as to what exactly happened when the plane landed and then obviously flipped over.
Hey, Phil, can I just follow up on that? What you said about the seats being much better connected to the fuselage than used to be.
Yes.
I mean, it's still weird to me that nowadays in a lot of first class seats, they will have a shoulder strap and they yell at you if you don't put that on when you're flying. If you're in coach,
right.
There is no shoulder strap. And I can't help but go back to like the Titanic and steerage. Should everybody have a shoulder strap?
Well, in a perfect world, you'd love that. And that may ultimately happen. But as of right now, when they have, look, this was a recommendation by the NTSB a number of years ago to change the seating structure so that they were better equipped to handle a crash landing like this. I'm sure they looked at the idea of shoulder straps. And they concluded, look,
it's just
because
weird
of
that
the
some
cost
seats have it in the plane and not all
everything.
Right.
I understand what you're saying, Becky, but I mean, this kind of goes back to all things involving safety restraints with all modes of transportation. Should we have safety belts inside school buses? Yeah, we should. But you still see a lot that are out on the road.
In school buses, it's not like you
have
them. It's not like you have them in the front of the bus, but not in the back of the bus. That's the weird thing.
No, I understand what you're saying. I'm not arguing with you, Becky. I think everybody agrees that would be wonderful. And maybe that comes out of this. But the process for changing that will start with the NTSB.
How bad were the winds? I mean, it looked snowy. I mean,
Right.
What was the weather condition? And I'm just trying to figure out.
The weather conditions were challenging. They were challenging, Joe. The crosswind is what they're likely going to be looking at.
That's what I mean.
Because the crosswind was gusty. It was gusting anywhere. I've seen reports that it was gusting up to 35 or 40 miles per hour. There is a limit for regional jets as to how they can land, how great the crosswinds can be. I'm sure they wouldn't have tried it if the crosswinds were above expectation or above the limit. Maybe this was a gust. I mean, these are the kinds of things that they're going to be looking into.
Right, in the investigation. I'm just trying to figure out whether.
Right.
I mean, there's times where, you've been on flights, Phil, where the wind, you can feel it, and you can't believe the skill of the pilots. And it's like, I think a lot of times being a passenger, you're thinking it's more dangerous than it actually is because it happens, 50,000 flights a day landing. But it's amazing that it doesn't happen more. The reason I was asking, they do have different runways that the air traffic controllers could switch you to if they don't want you landing in a really strong cross. I'm just trying to figure out whether it's just
or they divert you, Joe.
Could be pilot error.
Joe, I've been on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that a possibility? Pilot error will be looked at. Look, in these accidents, and you heard me say this a few weeks ago with Washington, D.C., it's never one single thing. It's usually a series of events triggered by one thing, but then it deals with how did the pilots react? How did they handle it? Did air traffic control give clear instructions? All of these things will be looked into. And look, I've been on flights. I'm sure you guys have been on flights where you're about to land and you circle around again. Or sometimes I've been about to land and they divert us off to another airport because they can't. And look, they know what the rules are.
I will say some of the early stuff I was reading, and this is all very early, suggested that there was a bit of an air bump from a plane that came through right before it. But again, as Phil says, this is going to be investigated, and we will know. It's just going to take some time. Yeah.
Okay, Phil. Thanks.
cheese will be next.
Coming up on Squawk Pod, a meeting of powers in Riyadh. The Saudis host the U.S. and Russia for talks about the Ukraine-Russia war. Notably absent, Ukraine and any other European powers. The Heritage Foundation's Victoria Coates on the negotiations underway.
This could be a way for the United States to actually, gain from this exchange with Ukraine, that it's not just disinterested charity on the part of U.S. taxpayers for this war effort, but rather an exchange between sovereign nations.
You're listening to Squawk Pod. Here's Joe Kernan.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio is in Saudi Arabia for the highest profile talks with Russia since its invasion of Ukraine. Secretary Rubio is accompanied by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. In Middle East, envoy Steve Witkoff, they plan to meet with a delegation from Russia yesterday. The State Department described the talks as an opportunity to explore Russia's intentions on the conflict in Ukraine and other central issues in Ukraine. Won't be represented currently at these talks, but U.S. officials said Ukraine will have a seat at the table if normal or formal negotiations to end the conflict are convened later. The head of NATO, very interesting what he said, because they definitely wanted him to say this is crazy, what's happening with Europe. And he said, Europe needs to get its act together, and I'm behind what President Trump is doing unequivocally. So I don't know how this plays out. I guess in the end, this is what you'd want if it can be done in a way that Ukraine feels that it hasn't totally given up everything and in some type of fair settlement. But you want this war to end.
Yeah, Zelensky has not been happy that they don't have a seat at the table right now.
They will eventually.
But did you see the proposal made?
For the
rare earths.
Well, we've given them $200 billion so far. How much do you think is fair for us to try to recoup?
Well, it looks like we're going for 500
billion.
We may end up in for 500.
I think the way it was laid out, it was seen as stiffer reparations.
You're not on the United States as
Germany,
you're on Ukraine's side in this.
No, but Zelensky has said that he thinks it's fair to have some give back for all of this. I think the terms will be negotiated.
I just think the default is that we should get something. I don't know why the default is wow.
No, but I think
I'm not saying we shouldn't get anything.
Like
the question is,
are we asking for too much?
By the way, I think Zelensky would like it because it would keep U.S. skin in the game.
Right. That was why that's why he was the person who proposed it.
Right.
But I don't think
he was looking for terms quite as
I didn't think
starch.
He thought they could be this onerous. Exactly.
Right. Join us now, Victoria Coates, who served as Deputy National Security Advisor in the first Trump administration. She is now Vice President of the Heritage Foundation's Davis Institute for National Security and Foreign Policy. Victoria, do you think that Zelensky should assume that the United States will have its interests in mind, or is it a genuine concern that the United States talking to Russia? It's like, hey, why am I not there? You guys can make deals where I don't know if my interest is being represented. Is that a true concern, do you think? I might be worried.
Well, good morning, Joe. And yes, I think it's perfectly natural that President Zelensky would be deeply interested in the substance of the talks in Riyadh. But at the same time, I think this is also a critical moment for Secretary Rubio to sort of take the measure of Foreign Minister Lavrov, who's been in his position for some 20 years. And, to have these talks take place in a neutral environment like Riyadh, I find it interesting that what we have here, the world's three largest energy producers, kind of gathered together. So I think that'll be an interesting topic of conversation as well. But hopefully President Zelensky heard President Trump say yesterday that, of course, Ukraine will be deep in consultations before anything's decided. So I would see this as more of a get-to-know-you kind of meeting.
Did you know the head of NATO, the Secretary General, how long has the latest individual been? I'm shocked at some of his comments were so pro-Trump, and I thought NATO just bristled every time Trump opened his mouth. Do you know this gentleman? Is it pronounced Rutte? Mark Rutte?
Rutte, yeah. He's the former Prime Minister of the Netherlands. He became Secretary General of NATO last summer, replacing Jens Stoltenberg. who's actually came and spoke at Heritage this time last year, which surprised some people that this NATO Secretary General would come to our think tank. But I mean, he said that President Trump in his first term had done more to revitalize NATO than any previous president. And I think that's the important message to our European partners and allies, as well as our Canadian partners, is, NATO holds its fate in its own hands. It is not Donald Trump that is causing trouble for NATO. It's NATO's own failure to invest sufficiently in its defenses over the last 30 years. And the real problem is math. The plans that they agreed to at the NATO summit last summer require a 3.5% investment of GDP in defense to make those plans realistic. And unfortunately, when you have a country like Canada, the 10th biggest economy on the planet, at 1.38, the math just doesn't add up. So NATO is going to have to take it into its own hands. I thought Secretary General Rota's comments yesterday were very strong on that, but we'll see what they actually do.
Was shocked, saying I categorically reject any. Let me say, I absolutely reject the criticism of President Trump's initiative. I think it's only right that he tries to end this war. But if I were Ukraine, I don't know. Let me ask something else about the rare earths and compensation. Does Russia already have the areas where a lot of the rare earth and the valuable resources are located?
Certainly the parts of Ukraine that Russia is in right now, particularly in the east, do have a lot of resources, but the whole country is very rich in these things. And I think this could be a way for the United States to actually, gain from this exchange with Ukraine, that it's not just disinterested charity on the part of U.S. taxpayers for this war effort, but rather an exchange between sovereign nations and a material we obviously badly need. I mean, as you start talking about, the kind of technologies we're going to be investing in for the next 50 years, this is mission critical. And so I think a very effective way to justify the war effort.
Well, what if the United States said, yeah, we're going to, we've helped Ukraine, but this was your fault, Russia. Now you've got a lot of these rich minerals. We want some recompense from you as well. That might not go over well.
No, although I think, Russia is going to have to be held responsible for some of the terrible destruction that's taken place in Ukraine.
Well,
that'll be part.
Yeah,
it's part of the negotiations, I would assume, because that's a reality they're going to have to deal with.
So this is going to happen, you think, Victoria? You're optimistic that, I don't know, what do we call it, a deal? Are you optimistic there will be some type of end to the hostilities through a deal?
Well, I very much hope so. We'll be marking the third anniversary of this war in a couple of days. That's been 3 grinding years. It's been close to $200 billion out of the United States alone. It really needs to come to a resolution. I don't think we should be fighting down to the last Ukrainian. So, as President Trump has said, we want the loss of life to end, the economic destruction to end, and so hopefully we'll be able to get to a resolution that persuades Putin that this is not something he should do again.
Great. Okay. We appreciate that analysis, Victoria Coates.
Thank you.
Great morning. Thank you.
Next on Squawk Pod, Palantir's Alex Karp on the technological revolution we are living through. His new book tells all about it.
It's kind of risque. It's hard to know if it's like an off-color movie, hard power, soft. But
I like that. Wow, he goes there early.
This is Squawk Pod with Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin.
Up and Andrew, Q.
Welcome back to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square on this Tuesday morning. Kind of feels like a Monday for a lot of folks. Our next guest is sounding the alarm that Silicon Valley and the West have lost their way. Joining us right now is Alex Karp, Palantir CEO and co-founder. His first book is out this morning, The Technological Republic, Hard Power, Soft Belief, and the future of the West. We want to thank you for joining us.
It's kind of risque.
It's a little risque, you think?
The title, it's hard to know if it's like an off-color movie, hard power, soft. But
wow! Wow, he goes there early.
It's hard to know. It's hard to know.
I have about a million questions about the book, but before we get there, I just want to ask you a couple things about the news, because interestingly, I would say the book, which you wrote a year ago, in a way, you were predicting where we would be today in terms of some of the big issues.
The interesting thing, basically, what people should, it's not actually the standard book comes in two forms. Either promote yourself, it should be Karp AI, or it's somebody running for president. I'm doing neither. And so the book really is an attempt to say, look, everything you learned at your school and college about how the world works is intellectually incorrect. And here is a way of seeing the world that may not be right, but it's not wrong. And so trying to be right is very hard, but you can definitely know what's wrong. And what you've been taught in college, that you basically should have no beliefs, that the West is inferior, that the intellectual tradition of the West, it leads to self-flagellation and losing on the battlefield, losing intellectually, losing your party, losing your country, losing your border, that your institutions can't work because we're so good. It's actually wrong. And the West was actually never about that. And you can be good, decent, and win, and be intellectually correct. And what was absolutely spot on about what's in the book is we have this technological revolution. It's no longer fake. 3-4 years ago, institutions basically thought, I'd rather have a good steak dinner and a bad product, and at least I get the steak dinner because the software product doesn't work. Now we are in a software-defined world, and the nation that leads software is the USA. And so what does that mean for all institutions? What it means is those institutions have to actually live up to their core mandate. So a country has to have a border, the educational institutions have to work, the military actually has to be scary. You actually can have things function in a way where the outputs are much greater than the inputs. And people who ignore this are going to be washed away.
Why did you write this? Were you mad at the educational system? Did you think that they were teaching the wrong things to people? What sparked it?
Look, I think the West, as a notion and as a principle upon which it is executed again, is obviously superior. And not acknowledging that, because by not acknowledging it or denying it, you could pretend you were smarter or better than you were, has led to enormous problems in our society. And also, for the sake of humanity, we have been blessed with a resource called talent management and software production that no other country has. So what does that mean for us? What does it mean for the world? How do you manage that ethically? How do you prevent what we had? Essentially, we had a pagan religion that has infiltrated our universities, and that pagan religion basically says everything that's good about America, everything that actually works, is ipso facto bad. And by the way, you can't talk about it not working because it's a religion. So it's not even, and it's a new religion. It's not an old great religion, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. It's a new religion, and the tenets are West is bad, nothing can work. If it works, it's bad, and the West is, and that way of thinking has corroded every aspect of our society. Last not least, it leads to a situation where you get a complete corrosion of all institutions and to a legitimacy crisis. So no one actually believes anyone's an expert. I'll just make this last point. In the 50s, if there was this famous professor, Ken Arrow, and if Ken Arrow said you were smart, you got tenure. And why did that happen? It was because people knew Ken Arrow is smart, the institution he represents is the best in the world. There is no one like, actually, the only thing like that currently in tech is a Palantir degree. If you work for Palantir, everyone knows you're good. And that's basically, none of these, like when we went to school, the schools actually had credibility. The science was actually science.
Okay, so let me just ask, and I want to actually get into some of the news, but what would you do to bring it back, and do you think we're on that path now?
Well, I think actually, so one of the things that's not in the book, I think if you read the book, it reads like it was written today. But so one of the things that I would, if I were writing the book today, there's a sense that people have that there's a pendulum swing. So if you if you look at institutions that are failing and you talk to the smart people there, universities, UN, Democratic Party, they'll tell you there's going to be a pendulum swing back. But AI is actually breaking the pendulum swung. So what Europe thinks, if you like, I spent half my life in Germany. You talk to smart Germans, they're like, okay, we're having a bad time. We're going to have a good time. We did this under Schröder. It'll come back. We don't actually agree with all the stuff that people say. We can't say it publicly. That's what they say. Okay, but what they're not understanding is the technical revolution now is so great, you got to get on the train because that train is leaving and there is not going to be a swing back. So what I'm trying to say to people who are on the pendulum, people who are builders, is like, we have a responsibility. We have to be dedicated to our nation. What I'm saying to people who may think they can get off the train, university intellectuals, United Nations dedicated to undermining America and anyone who's Jewish or something, you're being left behind. And by the way, I'm happy you're being left behind. But just know, if you get left behind, do not cry that you're not part of the dialogue. And that's actually what's happening. They're like crying, like all these people are becoming protest parties. It's like, I grew up protesting in DC with my parents and no one listened. If you want to go back to that, just do not read the book, pretend this isn't happening.
Alex, how did so many, whoever's hiring at colleges, it was just sort of a mass hysteria to all be on the same page for who gets tenure and what dogma and orthodoxy makes you attractive to college, because it's everywhere. I don't understand how it happened, and I don't think we ever get it back.
Well, I understand how it happens. It's like this country is fundamentally Calvinist. So that's one of the great strengths of this country. And what Calvinism basically says, as opposed to like Lutheranism and other, is if you've done something big and important, you're probably a good person. And what you had at universities was an inversion and rejection of that. And so all the intellectual movements are downstream from that. And so and that inversion is very, very charismatic if you want to assume that you are right because you're wrong, basically. And it's a very, very charismatic movement. But I think the area where we bear responsibility, who disagree with it, is we have to stand up and say, but this doesn't work. We have to, one of the things in the book that's unusual is I'm quoting, like, judge them by the fruits they bear. Like, okay, you're in favor of this world order. What have you built that works? What, just like, show me any institution that you've created, any institution. And I want to see that institution where the inputs are less than the outputs. So okay, and I don't care what it is. It could be an intellectual project. It can be a road. It can be a skyscraper. It can be a weapon system. And what you will find is they'll literally say, I reject that frame. And that's okay, but it's our responsibility to hold them to account. You rejected the frame of something that could work. I'm not saying that everything I'm saying is right. I don't know that, but I am certain that what you're saying does not work, and you will be left behind in history.
Alex, let me ask you a couple of things that are in the news, and I just want to actually relate one of them to something you just said. You lived in Germany for half your life.
Yeah. And
there is a big debate going on about the politics in Germany right now. You're also Jewish. And there is support, and you've even seen it over the weekend. Marco Rubio and Elon Musk and others have been very supportive of the alt-right movement in Germany, while there have been questions about their association with some supporting Nazis and other things. I'm curious where you land on that.
I don't want to go into the technical weeds here, but the problem in Germany is that somehow the small portion of Germans that believe you cannot talk about migration without being a bigot, which is about probably 15%, 90% of them vote for the Green parties, have somehow tricked the larger parties into saying they will only vote for things if the far right doesn't vote with them, which basically, as a matter of pragmatic power, shifts all immigration policy to a small group of people that literally will not let you discuss the fact that Afghani immigrants to Germany have a 70x propensity compared to German population to commit certain kind of crimes. And that in the last couple of weeks, every single terror attack has been the result.
Did you go to jail for pointing that out?
You'll get into trouble, but this is the weird thing. Again, there's a lesson in this book, which is do not allow yourself to become a product of people you may tacitly agree with. So, like, I'm sympathetic with non-discrimination. I don't believe in discrimination across any variable. But you are being turned into a product by a certain small sector of the left because you're not allowed to talk about facts. Like in the last couple of weeks, every week there's what happens in Germany is there's a terror attack in the morning and the Greens and the left protest the far right in the afternoon. This is literally what's happening. And the average German, I know so many Germans who would never even use the term Alternative für Deutschland 4 weeks ago, they're telling me like, yeah, screw it, I'm going to vote for them. And the reason why is it's our responsibility. And you see this, by the way, why is the Democratic Party committing suicide? It's because
in the U.S. you're talking about.
In the U.S., it's the same thing. It's like we're not allowed to admit, we're not allowed to do true false. Like, okay, I agree with this person, I don't agree with this person. We literally have to say anything that's ever been uttered from this person in the whole timeline has to be wrong, including border, defense, and this is happening in every Western country. And again, it's very similar to the question you asked. Okay, we know why they do it. The Greens and others are really smart to do this because then in the end, they define how the society's run. But none of us want that society. And it's not bigoted to say, wait a minute, this is not working. And then you have follow-on issues. It's like, then, by the way, then on the outside, what I tell my German friends in private is, okay, you don't like what people are saying. But if you're not taking your immigration policy seriously, you have no tech scene. Germany had the most important tech scene in the world pre-war, bar none, like in America. It has de facto almost no tech scene. It's nascent. No one believes in it. No one's investing in it. The energy policies make no sense. And then you wonder why people don't take you seriously. You got to, in this book, it's basically like fix your thing at home or no one's taking you seriously. And then when people don't take you seriously, you get mad. Honestly, though, I'll tell you what I shouldn't even say this, but what I tell Europeans in private is, you know how when you go to the inner city in America and the mayor's talking about safety and you're like, get me out of this country? I tell them this in German. That's what we're thinking about your tech scene. No one's anyone seriously is telling you this is a joke.
Let me ask you one question.
And by the way,
I want to ask you about Ukraine, but let me just ask you one German question, which is, but how do you feel about some of the folks that are part of that far-right party? And how do you capture, how do you deal with that?
But again, let me just tell you, let me take a trick from the old thing. If you focus on some of those people I obviously don't like and probably don't like me, and is there anti-Semitism on the right? Yes, but the structural issue in Germany is actually anti-Semitism in an immigrant population. That is that is the biggest issue in Europe. But by the way, the point I'm trying to teach people is focus on what you believe. I don't really want to talk yes, there are people who will vote for me I don't like, and they don't like me. It's and on every issue, there are people who agree with me on Israel and I don't agree with on First and Second Amendment. You have to focus on what do I believe, and you know what? There are going to be some people who come with me I don't like and don't like me. That's okay.
Speak to this because we've been talking about Ukraine all morning, and you've been very involved in that battle. I want to show you this real quick if I could. I don't know if we even have time. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was just speaking literally moments ago after a 4.5-hour meeting with Russian officials in Saudi Arabia to reset relations with Moscow. And I would get to your thoughts on it if we could.
The goal of today's meeting was to follow up on the phone call the president had a week ago and begin to establish those lines of communication. The work remains. Today is the first step of a long and difficult journey, but an important one. And President Trump is committed to bringing an end to this conflict.
We are trying to bring an end to the conflict. Apparently, we're also asking for something on the order of $500 billion in terms of access to minerals and other things from Ukraine. Is that a fair deal?
Okay, look, I don't know anything about the deal and the intricacies of it. What I would say is, first of all, you put up people on the screen who are very talented. So if I look at this from an entrepreneurial perspective, the first thing I'm looking at is, okay, those three people are very talented. The second thing, I'll tell you something I think Trump does very, very well. He says, I'm not going to accept a paradigm that essentially leads to a stupid conclusion. And he's like, okay, great. I'm going to give you a new paradigm. You don't like my paradigm? Give me another one. And I think he's quite brilliant at this. So what I see is he's like, I'm not accepting a paradigm where America just keeps financing things. There's no real discussion. I'm sending 3 of the most talented people there. Let's figure it out. And again, what I would say to people who are trying to figure out how to be builders is do not accept a paradigm that is stupid, no matter who tells you that you should have it.
Okay, let me ask you a different question about paradigm shifting. So one of the things that's going on right now, Elon Musk working with the Doge team in Washington to try to get at some of the misspending that's been going on over the years.
Fraud, waste, and abuse.
And I think there's a lot of people who are super supportive of that. At the same time, you're hearing about resignations and all sorts of other things of folks who are questioning the access that they're getting to data. You are somebody who lives within data. You care about safety and security of data. Do you think we should have those concerns? And is there a way to do whatever's being done right now so that you can take the country and those who are questioning all of this with you,
well,
if you will?
What I don't like about what's going on is I just view this as, well, let's watch the Democratic Party commit suicide. And like, I've been a Democrat most of my life. I kind of view myself as outside it, but I don't like watching the Democrats just commit suicide. And what I see is most of the country doesn't really, at this point, given the fraud, waste, and abuse we know is there, 90% of the country is like, get rid of that fraud, waste, and abuse. And I just view this as yet another example of the progressive left boxing themselves into a suicide dance. Now, what the progressive left should be doing is saying, okay, Elon, you're clearly the most qualified person in the world to do something like this. We want to dialogue with you about how you're doing and what are you doing. I don't believe that's actually what happened. And again, I like Elon. I know I think he's obviously the most important builder in the world. And I just think, if you want to say my former side, I don't believe that they're actually engaging. I think it's like another dance where I'm supposed to say, of course, like whatever. It's like there's this one issue where and then you get boxed into, you cannot solve the problem. And then I would say, what is the biggest problem in this society? Biggest problem in this society from my perspective is legitimacy of our institutions. Why aren't they legitimate? They're not legitimate because, okay, do any of you really believe that 99% of your taxpayer dollars are being spent? But last and not least, and probably arguably most importantly, there's two revolutions happening. One is transparency and one is AI. Okay, so why is it that we do not know where every penny of our money goes? Like, how do you explain that to people? And by the way, slightly more technically, what large language models do is you can go into the contracts and see exactly what happened. So in the past, we couldn't do this. Now we can. The right response is, we want this to happen, we want to happen, we want to be involved in the dialogue. The real response is, it feels like the people criticizing Elon don't want it to happen. And this is going to destroy those people.
Alex Karp, the book is called The Technological Republic. We want to thank you for being here.
Come back tomorrow.
You can come back tomorrow.
Can you come back
the next
tomorrow?
day. We can do this.
We're going to
I'm not used to. I thought this was a joke because I'm not used to being reinvited.
No, we're starting at 6.
We'll see you. We start at 6. We got 3 hours.
We're going
to do it every morning.
Because you're just getting started. We're not off yet.
We're not off. We got about 15 seconds before we hand it over to the.
I just told everybody I want you back.
Okay. Well, I'm not used to, like, the Groucho Marx thing. I wouldn't go to a club that would have me as a member. I'm not used to being reinvited.
See you tomorrow morning.
And that is Squawk Pod for today. Thanks for starting your 4-day week with us. 1 day closer to the weekend already. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern to get the smartest takes and analysis from our TV show right into your ears. Follow Squawk Pod wherever you get your podcasts. We'll meet you right back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.